Welcome to Postcards, a brief look at people, places, the arts and curiosities from around the world. On today's program, a special look at what can be available for those liking to do a little shopping, jewellery for a special Valentine. In the auction houses, football memorabilia from the 1966 World Cup goes on sale. And for fans of the King, a new store specialises in Elvis collectibles. Our feature looks at the wonderful cathedrals scattered around England and the work being done to restore them. And the who's who in Britain's Black and Asian communities, acknowledging the huge contribution made by these high achievers. But first up, Harrods, the top people's store in fashionable Knightsbridge, West London. Keen shoppers camp overnight ready for the famous January sale and its bargains. A traditional jazz band cheered up the cold queues. It's become an annual event, the Scottish Pipers leading a horse-drawn carriage. This year the sale was opened by screen legend Raquel Welch. Harrods owner Mohammed Al Fayed was there to greet her and escort her into the store, followed by a crowd of frenzied shoppers breaking into a run. The countdown begins, and then it's all systems go.
1, 0, the sale's open, happy shopping.
By 9 a.m, when the doors opened, the queue of customers stretched around the building, and within half an hour they had spent more than $500,000. Shoppers came from all over the world in search of bargains. Some items were very special, like this toy Ferrari, a snip at $72,000. Or this 64.9 carat unmounted diamond being sold at half price for a cool $1.6 million US. Raquel Welch, 59, went for an hour-long tour of the store accompanied by its owner. As many as 350,000 people are expected to shop at the store on Saturday, the first of the sale, compared with 35,000 on a normal day. It's hardly romantic, but inside, away from the rain, there's a treasure trove of jewellery. Auction house Bonhams annually holds a Valentine's Day sale. There's something here to suit every buyer. From this topaz and pearl brooch to a pair of cufflinks. Lovers can even wear their hearts on their sleeves with these tokens. Above all, the sale is accessible to the non-collector looking for a genuine token of affection. The range is broad and most of the items are relatively inexpensive, ranging from small items at $300 to $500 US up to items at around $3,000. Hearts in every shape and size abound, as bracelets, brooches and lockets. It's a case of, if jewellery be the food of love, bid on. One of the key moments in English sporting history, the extra time goal that brought England victory in the 1966 Football World Cup final and allowed Bobby Moore to lift the trophy in triumph before an ecstatic Wembley crowd. Mementos of that championship recently went on sale in London. A shirt identical to that worn by Bobby Moore in the famous final was one of the main attractions of the auction, along with a Nobby Styles white number 4 shirt worn during the tournament. The sale prices far exceeded expectations. Styles' white shirt went for nearly $5,000 US. The auction pulled together memorabilia from the earliest days of international football. And it's not only international memorabilia that proved popular. This signed team photo of the Manchester United team, which lifted the European Cup in 1968, went for over $2,000. There were club shirts too, signed by the stars. This time buyers could submit their bids to the auction by the internet. A specialised television channel also carried it. This was the second auction associated with the auction channel. A high percentage of the items were sold either through the auction channel itself or through the internet, opening up the sale to collectors around the world. 93% of the lots were sold, some for many thousands of pounds. Programs of matches from 40 and 50 years ago proved to be valuable draw cards. But the biggest sum, $12,880, was paid for a memento of the Manchester United side of 1957-58, including photos, signed programs and match tickets. A new store in London is set to become a focus for fans of Elvis and the Beatles. These two great icons of rock have now been united at 233 Baker Street, right next door to Sherlock Holmes' fictitious address. The store's launch was graced with the presence of the first Presley member ever to visit the UK to speak publicly about the King. The Elvis myth is as strong as ever, and no event will be complete without a spooky Elvis coincidence. This statue was damaged in an accident. Uncanny because, according to a family member, in every show, Presley had problems with microphones. Elvis's first cousin, Donna Presley Early, is the daughter of Elvis's Aunt Nash, Vernon's sister. Her book, Elvis: Precious Memories, has its worldwide release in London. Donna will be helping to recruit Elvis lookalikes and sound-alikes, who'll be conducting the first London rock and roll sing-along bus tours to operate from the shop.
Well, it's a 1 for the money, a 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. Now go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede.
As Elvis never made it to Britain, Bobby Memphis says his tribute show is to give British fans something they're missing. Elvisly Yours owner, manager and all-round Elvis expert Sid Shaw wants to get London singing. He says the music of Elvis had a very special quality. There's something very soothing, very therapeutic in Elvis's voice. The legend, the legacy, the T-shirt. Operators hope the new location will become the capital's centre to the King and the Fab Four. The splendour of England's cathedrals, standing at the centre of the country's most historically important towns and housing a wealth of art and culture, these magnificent structures continue to draw crowds. Canterbury Cathedral has been a place of worship since before 597, when St Augustine became the first archbishop. Throughout the Middle Ages, pilgrims from all over Europe wended their way to Canterbury to worship at the shrine of the murdered Archbishop Thomas à Becket. As a result, the cathedral, with its magnificent structure of French limestone, called cane stone, prospered. Today, the cost of maintaining such a building is enormous. Canterbury has spent over £12 million, nearly $20 million US, on masonry repairs over the last 3 decades, tackling 3 main problems. Acid attack from lichens is the most obvious, but more insidious is the black stain of years of pollution from charcoal fires and a nearby gasworks. The stonework is affected because it's porous, absorbing and releasing moisture. The carbon products and others on the outside are sucked into the stone. Some of them come out, but eventually they build up a crust on the stone and that blows out. Cleaning reveals a multitude of sins beneath. The masonry has been weakened by the introduction of Portland sand cement in the mid-Victorian era. Ironically, it was considered a strong weathering material that would strengthen the building. In fact, it's so dense, moisture can't escape through the joint and is forced to seep through the stone's surface, exacerbating the acid problem. As much of the sand cement as possible is raked out and replaced with a lime mortar. New stones are fixed with the same material. The lime products, which have been reintroduced, will migrate through the stone and strengthen it. Between 10 and 15% of the surface has to be restored. Some of the stone has the original mason's mark and toolings on it from 1180 and 1182. On the upper 6 to 8 metres of the wall, where the scaffolding of the Victorians couldn't reach the roof, the stone was in perfect condition, just as it was left in traditional form. However, below, where they restored and worked on it, it was in poor condition. Much of the work centres around correcting the well-meaning efforts of previous restorers, who did the best with what was available at the time, but the choice of Dolting stone from southwest England to renew the Candle Tower spire in the 1920s was another big mistake. The grainy stone proved totally unsuitable to the environment and has weathered poorly in the frosts. It's literally crumbling away and will be totally replaced. It will mean losing these beautiful hand-carved gargoyles. No amount of restoration could adequately preserve them, but they will be replaced with something equally charming. The cathedral's team of stonemasons are handworking the candle tower stones, and Paul Ellis is carving new gargoyles. The masons are given free rein on the decorations. Paul says the images just pop into his head and he carves without a guide or drawing. Most of the work is done like the medieval mason did, a free interpretation, so it's a work of art again. It's a labour of love for these masons. Many of them have worked on Canterbury Cathedral for 2 decades. The building has been developing and changing since the first stone was laid in 597, and Canterbury is fortunate enough to be able to fund its works programs through donations invested from a 1970s appeal. Other cathedrals have not been so lucky. Restoration is costly because of the scarcity of quality materials and expertise required, and there's a limit to money a congregation can raise from cake stalls and parish functions. In the case of Ely, north of Cambridge, the Romanesque cathedral was in serious need of repair in 1986. Restoration work commenced with not a penny in the coffers. Parish appeals raised $6.5 million, but then disaster struck, perhaps even an act of God. Quite unexpectedly, there was a hurricane in 1987. There was a 90-mile-an-hour gale which blew in windows of the octagon and did a great deal of damage in the higher reaches of the cathedral. The English Heritage Society has come to the rescue of many cathedrals, including Ely, with its Cathedrals Grant Scheme, totalling $123.2 million over the last decade. Ely has replaced vast amounts of wood, glass, stone and lead, and is planning a Thanksgiving banquet this summer to celebrate being the first cathedral to complete its extensive works under the scheme. Part of Salisbury Cathedral's $800,000 grant is going on this 16th century stained glass window being restored at Canterbury. Victorian restorers leaded over cracks even if they disfigured the artwork. Today the false leads are removed, cracks cleaned and modern adhesives syringed into the gap. By lining up the glass, the crack will be almost invisible. Today's approach to restoration is preservation of the original rather than intervention. The bores and profile motifs, however, show an earlier thinking, which was to maintain the complete picture of glass at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing pieces of original artwork. From the detail and fineness of the painting, it's obvious the original artist was an extremely good craftsman. And most of the painting has survived all this time. However, the other 2 heads are far cruder. This was obviously the best the studio who repaired it could do at the time. Derek White marvels at the craftsmanship of the ruby glass curving around the stag heads ground out by hand. Today, modern grindstones would do the job. Salisbury has ordered no repairs, just cleaning, as it wants to preserve the imperfect work of former artisans as part of the window's history. Built on a Benedictine monastery in 178 to commemorate Britain's first Christian martyr, St Albans Cathedral today contains one of the country's earliest vaulted wooden ceilings. English Heritage money has restored its structure and painted ceiling. These wall paintings have suffered the misguided restoration of last century, which ultimately caused their greater deterioration. One of the techniques was to put a layer of wax over all the surfaces, but over time that's collected dirt and moisture builds up behind, which is very damaging to the surface of the painting. While these paintings won't look any brighter, they will be cleaner, more stable and in better condition. With such treasures to preserve, works programs carry on, and English Heritage will continue its support, handing out a further $4.8 million for the next few years. English Heritage says the grant scheme has breathed new life into England's 61 cathedrals. As major repairs near completion, many are in better condition now than ever. Works on such a grand scale certainly won't be necessary for another 100 years, ensuring these awe-inspiring buildings remain important as places of worship, serve as museums and galleries, and thrive as the nerve centre of communities that they were always intended to be. At 15, Shola Amar was overheard singing outside a London Underground station. 5 years later, she's one of Britain's top vocalists. She's just one of the entries in a newly published guide to high achievers from Britain's Asian community. Asians in the Millennium and the Black Who's Who, both launched at the Foreign Office in London, include people from an Asian or black background who have achieved success in fields from politics to business, the arts to the armed services. Nominations were made by readers of magazines targeted at the ethnic communities. Project manager for the ethnic media group, John Hughes, says the contribution that Asian and black people are making to the wealth of this country has gone unnoticed for years. This book dispels all of the stereotypical attitudes. One aim is to show that blacks and Asians in Britain are making their mark outside the familiar territory of show business and sport. Keith Manchanda joined the Navy in 1970, the only Asian sailor at the time. Now he's a commander and holds an NBE. Few of those included in the who's who of Asian and black Britons regarded the idea as patronising, though some regretted the need for such separate ethnic directories in a country which prides itself on being racially integrated and multicultural. Perhaps in a few years there'll be just one British who's who, representing the high achievers in all sectors of British society, regardless of racial background. Meanwhile, in another part of London, this lineup represented the changing face of the Asian business community. These young second and third generation Asians have made their fortunes in the new economy, telecommunications, computer software and the internet. They're 6 of the 47 new entries on this year's list of the UK's 200 richest Asians, compiled by the Eastern Eye. During the 4 years since the Asian newspaper has published the list, there's been a marked shift from traditional Asian pursuits of wholesaling, textiles and the food industry. The combined wealth of these 200 individuals is a staggering $17.2 billion US, an increase of 40% on last year. Newcomer to the list, worth $81.5 million, is Amjad Beg. Based in Manchester, he drove a taxi, bought and sold cars and worked in the property market, before recognising the value of must-have technology like mobile phones. The explosion in the industry has given rise to many phone company outlets, but the Phone People, in which Mr Beg owns a 50% share, aims to differ from its competitors. With 120 outlets across the UK and a staff of 400, the Phone People turned over $40 million last year, with $3.2 million clear profit. Beg says his success is based on old-fashioned ideals: hard work, belief in what we're doing, and a bit of help from God. Britain's richest Asian, however, belongs to traditional heavy industry. Topping the 200 list is Lakshmi Mittal, worth $3.5 billion US. He runs the world's 6th largest steel maker, Ispat International. Mittal buys old rundown steel companies. He turns them around, making them more efficient. He's known as one of the Asian serial entrepreneurs. This year's list also includes 16 women, 8% higher than the ratio of women in the Sunday Times top 200 richest people. It shows Asian women are no longer in the kitchen, but in the boardrooms, and displaying all the signs of girl power. London taxi drivers have again demonstrated their concern for the environment, with the launch on the capital streets of the first commercially available gas-powered cab. August '98 saw the first green cab in use, which runs on an electrochemical engine producing zero emissions. But this initiative means taxi drivers who already own a diesel cab can have it converted to run on LPG, which produces 75% less emissions than diesel. London's largest taxi cab dealer, KPM UK, will in effect give the cab an engine transplant, replacing the Japanese diesel engine with a British-made LPG engine. KPM UK teamed up with a British alternative fuels developer and British automotive engineering company Janspeed to provide the solution which dealt with a number of development problems. The old engine used diesel and was neither reliable nor efficient. The potential in alternative fuels was recognised and a new engine developed. With those problems solved, the government backed the project and is paying 75% of the costs of conversion. It realises the contribution the EcoCab Coalition and Kalor Gas are making to cleaning up the city. With LPG currently selling for about 40 pence a litre, about half the price of diesel, cabbies will be saving between £50 to £70 per week on fuel. Ultimately, the environment is the winner. It's another step to making unpleasant city life a thing of the past. And finally, a power saver or generator of a more basic kind. This boot was made for walking and, believe it or not, may soon be able to generate electricity as well. The idea is the brainchild of one of Britain's most celebrated inventors, Trevor Bayliss. He's developed a way to use the energy we generate when we walk. Trevor's idea is breathtakingly simple. The invention works by using a small device made up of cells of a quartz-type material, which release electricity when compressed. It's fitted into the sole of a shoe, and as the wearer walks, they press on the device, and the energy is converted into electricity. This can be stored in a battery which has been attached to the shoe. Trevor, who lives in London, also invented the clockwork radio, which has been so successful in the developing world. Its wind-up mechanism means people no longer have to recharge batteries. He's now trying to adapt that technology to develop a device that could potentially save thousands of lives. He's working on a wind-up generator unit that could run a landmine detector. But meanwhile, he's still perfecting his latest invention and is hoping that it encourages other people in Britain to be more creative. Trevor has already had some very positive responses to his power shoes. You never know, one day soon you could be wearing a pair to power your mobile phone. And that's all for today. Join us again next time for a postcard look at interesting people, places and the arts.